Hello, everybody. This is yours truly, Mentor Lawyer. But what I'm doing is I'm taking notes for my reanalysis. And what I'm going to do is I've listened to the proffers. I've listened to the testimony of Katherine Magbanua live. And I'm still processing a lot of information that is coming into the case. And a lot has happened since Donna was charged. We learned a lot more details about the case recently. So a reanalysis of a case, of a pending case. So here we go. Let's start watching the testimony of Katherine Magbanua, and we'll embark on this reanalysis together.
You can be seated from now. If the jurors are good to be brought in, please bring them in. The witness may be seated. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
You may take your seat. Please speak loudly and clearly.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am, please say your name and spell your name.
Katherine Magbanua, Katherine Magbanua.
I see that you're in jail clothes. Are you currently in custody?
Yes, ma'am.
What are you in custody for?
The murder?
Are you doing a sentence for murder?
Yes, ma'am.
You were convicted of murder?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that the murder of Dan Markel?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a trial in your case?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you testify?
Yes, ma'am.
You testified on your own behalf.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And when you testified, were you truthful with the jury?
No, ma'am. I was not.
Did you take the same oath that you just took today in your own trial?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your defense when you were tried?
That I had nothing to do with it.
All right. That we got it right in reference to Charlie Adelson and we got it right in reference to the killers,
Yes,
but you
ma'am.
weren't in the middle.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that true?
No, ma'am. It was not.
Were you in the middle?
Yes, ma'am. I was.
And didn't you also testify in the trial in which Sigfredo Garcia was convicted of murder?
Yes, ma'am. I was.
And what was his defense?
That he had nothing to do with it.
That we got it right in reference to Charlie Adelson and we got it right in reference to the killers, but he had nothing to do with it,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor. Overruled. Ms. Calhoun, make sure you have any questions.
And was that defense truthful?
No, ma'am. It was not.
So Sigfredo Garcia was involved.
Yes, ma'am. He was.
So why tell the truth now?
I believe that the truth needed to come out now so that the family can get some type of closure.
Why didn't the truth need to come out last year or the year before or the year before that?
I was trying to defend myself.
You were trying to get off.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you think you'd be successful in your trial with that defense?
I thought so.
Has anyone promised you anything for your testimony here today?
No, ma'am.
Weren't you originally offered immunity for cooperation in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
But you didn't take us up on that
No, ma'am, I didn't.
because you thought you could get off completely.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
And now you're doing a life sentence.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Did Charlie Adelson, and we got it right in reference to the killers, but he had nothing to do with it,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor.
And was that defense truthful?
No, ma'am, it was not.
So Sigfredo Garcia was involved.
Yes, ma'am, he was.
So why tell the truth now?
I believe that the truth needed to come out now so that the family can get some type of closure.
Why didn't the truth need to come out last year or the year before or the year before that?
I was trying to defend myself.
You were trying to get off.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you think you'd be successful in your trial with that defense?
I thought so.
Has anyone promised you anything for your testimony here today?
No, ma'am.
Weren't you originally offered immunity for cooperation in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
But you didn't take us up on that
No, ma'am, I didn't.
because you thought you could get off completely.
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
And now you're doing a life sentence.
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Did Charlie Adelson threaten to harm you if you told the truth?
No, ma'am, he didn't threaten me.
Did anybody threaten you to keep your silence?
No, ma'am.
All right. So did you know Dan Markel?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you have any personal beef with him?
No, ma'am, I did not.
What was your motivation for becoming a part of this murder plot?
Financially,
So not as a favor to Charlie Adelson?
Objection, Your Honor. What is the objection?
I'll rephrase it, Your Honor. Was it a favor to Charlie Adelson?
yes, ma'am, it was.
Okay, but your primary motivation was not favor to Charlie Adelson?
Well, yes, ma'am, it was. And financially,
All right, because you were going to get paid for your
Yes.
part?
Yes,
How much
ma'am.
did you get paid?
I don't know the exact amount.
What was your relationship to Charlie Adelson?
He was my ex-boyfriend.
When did you meet him?
I believe that was in 2013.
Do you know what month?
Has to be around September.
Can you point him out and describe what he's wearing?
He's sitting over there with a blue jacket and a blue tie.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
The record will reflect.
Show you what I marked as states 48. Recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How do you recognize it?
That's when we went to Key West.
Is that a fair and accurate photo of you and Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am, it
Is
is.
that when the two of you were taken, when the two of you were dating?
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I ask the movement evidence states 48.
Okay, objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
48 is admitted.
Do we have that for publication? So was this photo taken before or after the murder?
Before.
Who came up with the idea to kill Dan Markel?
Charlie?
So Sigfredo Garcia didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Luis Rivera didn't come up with the idea?
No, ma'am, he did not.
When did the defendant first bring this idea up to you?
My first recollection was around Halloween of 2013.
Around Halloween or on actual?
On Halloween, yes, ma'am.
All right. What's your recollection of how that came up?
We were at a Halloween party in Lincoln Road, and right before we were about to go, he got in the car with me and he asked me a question.
What was the question?
Do you know anybody that can harm someone?
And did you know anybody that could harm someone?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who was that?
Sigfredo.
And at the time, what was your relationship with Sigfredo?
Wasn't the best.
But he was the father of your children, right?
Yes, ma'am. He is.
So were you dating both men at this time, or were you only dating
No,
Charlie?
I was only dating Charlie.
And so he meaning the defendant, initially said, do you know anyone that could harm someone? Was he aware of, came up?
We were at a Halloween party in Lincoln Road, and right before we were about to go, he got in the car with me and he asked me a question.
What was the question?
Do you know anybody that can harm someone?
And did you know anybody that could harm someone?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Who was that?
Sigfredo.
And at the time, what was your relationship with Sigfredo?
Wasn't the best.
But he was the father of your children, right?
Yes, ma'am. He is.
So were you dating both men at this time, or were you only dating
No,
Charlie?
I was only dating Charlie.
And so he meaning the defendant, initially said, do you know anyone that could harm someone? Was he aware of your connection to Sigfredo Garcia when he made that statement?
Not that I know of. No, ma'am.
Did you suggest Sigfredo Garcia at that time to the defendant?
No, ma'am.
What did you say?
I just said yes and kind of left it alone.
All right. Did it go any further than that at that time?
Not that night. I don't
Did
believe
you
so.
know who he wanted harmed
Did
at that time?
no, ma'am.
All right. Had you become aware during the course of your relationship with him that he had some kind of issue going on with his sister's ex-husband?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
What did you learn about that?
He was just stating that his mom and dad was stressed and that his sister was having problems with her husband and custody of her two children.
And when did you learn that the person that the defendant wanted harmed was this ex-husband of the sister.
I believe later on.
All right. And when did you learn the name Dan Markel?
It wasn't until, I don't know if it was on my trial or when Sigfredo got arrested.
Okay, so even when he was killed, you didn't know the name of the person that was being killed.
Yes, I never knew his name.
How did the defendant refer to this person, if not by the name Dan or Danny Markel?
Wendy's husband.
So you knew that the person that was going to be initially harmed was Wendy's husband.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you knew that there were issues, or what did you know about the beef with him?
He painted this picture that this was a terrible man and making his family go through a lot custody-wise with his sister.
Right, and when he would say these things to you, is it in the context of his mom specifically or his family in general?
I believe it was more towards his mom.
Meaning what?
That his mom hasn't been sleeping, his mom is not eating. I know his dad wasn't the best health either, but he would refer to his mom a lot.
All right. And the reason she wasn't sleeping or eating, did that have to do with this ex-husband of Wendi?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, let me add a little bit of interesting commentary. There is something that I think that Rashbaum misses in his analysis of the case and how to tackle this case. Because when I was thinking about the defense that Charles Adelson raised, you have to think about it this way. In essence, what Charles Adelson admitted to present this extortion defense is that he caused the death of Dan Markel. And that he caused the death of Dan Markel because of his outward, I mean, not just him, but the entire family, Wendi, Charles, Donna, and Harvey, all four of them caused the death of Dan Markel because they joked about a hitman. This was not just Charles. We have Wendi Adelson admitting to the fact that she repeats Charles' joke in bad taste to many people, right? They, in essence, you know this book, The Secret, when you're supposed to envision yourself being super rich, you envision yourself money coming your way and then money comes your way. Well, if this family had so much hatred towards Dan Markel and wanted somebody to kill him to the point of joking about it, in essence, what you're admitting to the jury is that you caused the death. You were there joking about something so horrible, so heinous, so serious, but something that happens a lot, especially in third world countries in South America. In South America, it happens a lot. And it also happens in the United States. We hear about murder for hires all the time. And so you're telling people about how you have this ex-husband of the sister, the daughter, in Tallahassee, who's a horrible person, who is keeping Wendi Adelson prisoner in Tallahassee, who's just making everybody suffer and all this stuff. And you're saying this out loud, and you're talking about the fact that you gave somebody a TV instead of hiring a hitman. You want a hitman, and people know that you have a lot of money, and you mention maybe to people that you're willing to pay this guy $1 million to let him move to South Florida. Well, guess what? Even if there is any truth to the fact that somebody then took him up on all these hints, the subliminal messages that the Adelsons wanted this job taken care of, sorry, once those people get caught, you're going to be convicted. The bottom line is I don't see a jury that even with this story, and even believing that there was a little bit of an extortion, that somebody actually just decided, hey, you know what? This rich family wants this guy dead. I'm just gonna go do it, and then they were gonna pay, right? And it's gonna be a discount. Instead of giving this guy $1 million, they're just gonna give me a third. Even if that's true, who's gonna let them get away with that, right? I mean, if you wish this murder so much to happen that it did happen, you'll be convicted, right? I mean, that's just a reality. I think that it passes Rushbaum and gave him overconfidence in this extortion defense, where in essence they're really dooming everybody. They're not going to get away with that just by saying, "Oh yeah, we just wished it, and somebody did it, and then they came collect from us." Of course, there are millions of other things about the story that are ridiculous, but I think that that's the point, that most jurors may not consciously think about it, but in essence, they're admitting to the fact that they caused the death of Dan Markel. So I don't see any jury letting them get away with that. Anyway, let's resume watching. And I'm sorry, I'm occasionally stopping the video and going back a little bit because I'm taking notes. So I don't want to miss anything. I want to watch it with you guys. This is a homework video. We're doing a live together. We're doing some homework together. And then, like I said, I'm going to do a much better video where I summarize everything that we learned from Katherine Magbanua's testimony with the help of Ladybug in a few days. So bear with me. Let's get back to the video.
Eating. I know his dad wasn't the best health either, but he would refer to his mom a lot.
All right. And the reason she wasn't sleeping or eating, did that have to do with this ex-husband of Wendi?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever tell the defendant who it was that was going to be doing the job?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Why didn't you say the name Sigfredo to Charlie Adelson?
I always referred to each other as my friend. Neither one of them wanted to really hear each other's names.
And why is that?
Because Sigfredo was the father of my kids, and I was dating him at that time. I was dating Charlie at that time.
Okay, so Sigfredo Garcia, did he have strong feelings about the defendant?
Yes, he didn't like him.
All right, and is that because you were dating him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and vice versa, you're not going to talk about the child's father with the new boyfriend either?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So is it true then that you were sort of walling these two off from each other before the issue of the murder and the conspiracy ever even arose?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that pattern continue throughout the murder conspiracy?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Do you think Charlie Adelson knew that it was your child's father that you were going to?
He might have had an idea, but he just never said it out loud.
There's one phone call between, I think it's from Sigfredo Garcia to Harvey Adelson.
I will address this question because it is a fair one. I think that correctly, this person is pointing out that we don't know what a jury will do. And if I said that no jury will buy the story, obviously that is incorrect. It could be a jury that could buy that story. Of course, that was just one point of all of the different ridiculous things about the defense theory that I don't think a reasonable jury will buy. But that is true that one never knows exactly what will happen in any case. So, of course, there's always a chance of something weird happening with the jury.
And father of the defendant, Do you know anything about that phone call? That was on July 1st of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you know about that phone call?
From the trial, what I remember was that Sigfredo had contacted or was trying to contact Charlie, but we were in a heated argument at that time. We were kind of in the middle of the street, and I guess it's the first thing he looked up was his work number.
All right, so you say you're in a heated argument. Is this the confrontation that occurred where you and the defendant were going jet skiing?
He might have had an idea, but he just never said it out loud.
There's one phone call between, I think it's from Sigfredo Garcia to Harvey Adelson, father of the defendant. Do you know anything about that phone call? That was on July 1st of 2014.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you know about that phone call?
From the trial, what I remember was that Sigfredo had contacted or was trying to contact Charlie, but we were in a heated argument at that time. We were kind of in the middle of the street, and I guess it's the first thing he looked up was his work number.
All right, so you say you're in a heated argument. Is this the confrontation that occurred where you and the defendant were going jet skiing?
I believe that was after.
It was after that incident?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how many interactions personally, face to face, did, to your knowledge, Charlie Adelson have with Sigfredo Garcia?
That was probably the only one that I remember was that jet ski accident.
Accident?
Or like the confrontation.
All right, tell us what happened at that confrontation.
Sigfredo had just picked up the kids and he was eating at a corner pizza place with the kids, and he saw that Charlie was coming by to go pick me up, and I guess saw the jet skis in the back of the car. So he loaded up the kids and cut us off, was screaming a couple things out loud, but we didn't really hear anything because our windows was up.
All right. Did you say he cut you off? Do you mean in traffic?
In the back street of where I lived at that time.
All right. And when you say he cut you off, did he run you off the road or something?
I guess saw the jet ski.
So just to clarify what she's saying here, so there was an incident on there was a phone call from Sigfredo Garcia to Harvey Adelson on July 1st. And what she's saying is that, I guess earlier in the day, Sigfredo Garcia had picked up the kids from Katie, and then he went, instead of taking away, he went nearby to get some pizza. And then Sigfredo sees Katie going somewhere with a guy, with Charlie, with a jet ski in the back. So he's getting the kids. Katie's going somewhere with Charles Adelson with jet skis. He gets mad about that. I don't know why, but he gets mad about that. Maybe she asked him to babysit or something like that, and maybe told him some different story. And instead, she was gonna go jet skiing with her boyfriend. So then he gets mad, and then he gets the kids in the car, and he goes after them, and he has this incident. Then later, they are having an argument in the street, and Sigfredo gets mad and wants to call Charles. And I guess he looks up on his phone or whatever, because she says in the middle of the street, he looks up Charles Adelson's business number and calls it. And I guess that's why there was some reference in a prior trial that the call may have been to the Adelson Institute, and that the Adelson Institute would reroute the phone calls and on that particular day, to Harvey Adelson's phone. And that's why there was a message left on Harvey Adelson's phone from Sigfredo Garcia, who was actually intending to call Charles Adelson. So we got it. Here we go.
He's in the back of the car. So he loaded up the kids and cut us off, was screaming a couple things out loud, but we didn't really hear anything because our windows was up.
All right. Did you say he cut you off? Do you mean in traffic?
In the back street of where I lived at that time.
All right. And when you say he cut you off, did he run you off the road or something else?
He kind of just went right and blocked the road in front of us. So Charlie had to kind of do a 3-point turn and go around the other way.
Did the two men actually get out into the street and confront each other?
No, ma'am, they did not.
Okay. Were any actual words exchanged through the windows?
Through the windows, yes, but I had my window up, so we didn't know what Sigfredo was saying.
All right. So Sigfredo shouted some things out the window. Did Mr. Adelson do the same?
No, he did not.
And what were the things that were shouted out the window? Were you able to hear them or not?
I didn't hear anything.
All right. And at this point, this is July 1st of 2014, the plot is already underway to do this murder, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Does Sigfredo Garcia know that he's doing the murder for Charlie Adelson?
To my knowledge, he might have had an inkling about it, but I don't know. That was never spoken of.
Okay. The killers, and when I say the killers, I'm referring to Garcia and Rivera, knew they were doing something for a lady to get her kids back. Do you know how they knew that information?
I believe it's because of the envelope that Charlie gave me to pass over.
So you didn't relay that information to them that it had to do with a lady and her kids?
I might have mentioned it to Sigfredo, yes.
Okay. So if you mentioned that to Sigfredo, would you be, I guess, were you intentionally trying to characterize this job as being related to someone other than Charlie Adelson?
I believe so, yes.
Is that because Sigfredo Garcia would not have wanted to do anything to help out Charlie Adelson?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So do you think Sigfredo knew that this lady with the kids was somehow connected to Charlie Adelson?
I believe so.
All right. And there was going to be a lot of money paid for this job, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you know anybody else with that kind of money or that might have had that kind of money to get this job for them?
No, ma'am, I did not.
All right. You mentioned the paper. Luis Rivera said there was a paper that Sigfredo had when they came to do the murder. Do you know anything about that paper?
No, ma'am, I don't.
All right. Did you provide a paper to Sigfredo Garcia?
Yes, I did.
All right. And when you say you don't know anything about it, but you gave it to him, you obviously know something about it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So tell us I know what you're trying to say is you don't know what was on the paper.
The content of it. Yes.
Tell us how you got the paper.
One moment. That's right. Ms. Kappelman, please use open-ended questions.
Tell us how you came into possession of this paper that the killers had.
Okay. One day, just a random night that I was over at Charlie's house, he had a manila envelope that was sealed. He told me, Katie, do not open it. Do not touch it. Do not look inside it. I didn't print this paper out from my office, printed it probably from another office, and basically give that paper to the other person.
All right. And who is saying this?
This was Charlie.
All right. This defendant.
Yes, ma'am.
So he says to you, I have this paper. How does he give it to you?
I had a diaper bag, so he showed me the envelope, and I was like, just put it in there.
Did he express any concerns about fingerprints being on the envelope or the contents?
Yes, ma'am. He said he wore a glove so that there's no fingerprints on it. He was very specific about me not opening it and not looking inside it. And he also told me,
How does he give it to you?
Just going to answer that question. That is actually a good question, and it is part of the analysis that I'm doing, the reanalysis of this testimony. Is, first of all, I do think it's likely that she will testify. They're going to still put on the whole story, and she is the middle woman, so I think, of course, she will testify. Surprises can happen. new developments can happen. Sigfredo may talk, who knows? But I do want to also think through Katie's testimony to see how it can be used in a trial against Donna. Thanks for your question.
All right. And who is saying this?
This was Charlie.
All right. This defendant.
Yes, ma'am.
So he says to you, I have this paper. How does he give it to you?
I had a diaper bag, so he showed me the envelope, and I was like, just put it in there.
Did he express any concerns about fingerprints being on the envelope or the contents?
Yes, ma'am. He said he wore a glove so that there's no fingerprints on it. He was very specific about me not opening it and not looking inside it. And he also told me that he didn't print it from his office.
All right. And what about licking the envelope?
And that he didn't lick the envelope.
He said he did not lick the
He
envelope?
did not lick that.
And what was the purpose of that?
I guess his DNA.
Okay. So did you touch the envelope?
It was in my diaper bag, but I don't remember if I never opened it, but I might have touched it just to stick it inside in my diaper bag.
And did you deliver the envelope to Sigfredo Garcia?
I must have contacted Sigfredo and just told them, hey, come by the house. And then, he was kind of in and out of my life. So he'd pop up. He literally got the envelope. I was like, you have something inside that bag. And then he grabbed it, stuffed it in his pants, and left.
Okay. In regards to the June trip that the killers made, did you provide Garcia or Rivera with any money for expenses
Yes, ma'am.
associated with that trip?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where did you get the money from to do that?
From Charlie Adelson.
Can you tell us about that? What was the context of you getting that money?
Sigfredo would just ask me, hey, I'm going to need some money. I need to go out of town. And I'm like, okay. So then I'd go to Charlie, or I'd be at Charlie's house, and I'll tell him I need some money for the expenses.
And he gave you some money?
Yes, ma'am.
About how much money, if you know?
I can't recall, but it was a couple $100.
So this thing started back in October of 13 and doesn't get done until July of 14. Can you describe whether there's any pressure as time is going on and this thing is not getting done?
Trying to remember, like in the beginning of the year, I don't think there was really much. I mean, he's been planting this seed in my head that this needed to get done. This needed to get done. And I guess towards probably around June, July is when he was a little bit more adamant about this job getting done.
Okay. And when you say he, you're talking about who?
Charlie.
Did you ever have any contact with any other Adelson about this job?
No, ma'am.
In the context of this needs to get done. So this thing started back in.
So that is important right there. Just to emphasize what she just said, Katie did confirm that she had no direct contact with anyone else in the Adelson family about this hit. So the only evidence that she can directly give against is really against Charles. But we'll listen more to see if there's anything else about any other Adelson that she can say.
October of 13 and doesn't get done until July of 14. Can you describe whether there's any pressure as time is going on and this thing is not getting done?
Trying to remember, like in the beginning of the year, I don't think there was really much. I mean, he's been planting this seed in my head that this needed to get done. This needed to get done. And I guess towards probably around June, July is when he was a little bit more adamant about this job getting done.
Okay. And when you say he, you're talking about who?
Charlie.
Did you ever have any contact with any other Adelson about this job?
No, ma'am.
In the context of, this needs to get done, this pressure getting put on you, is there ever a mention of the mom, Donna, or the divorce situation in the context of getting it done?
At that time, not that I could recall.
Will you publish 35, please? In the context of, this needs to get done, this pressure getting put on you, is there ever a mention of the mom, Donna, or the divorce situation in the context of getting it done?
At that time, not that I could recall.
Will you publish 35, please? Is this you on the left side of the screen?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Right. And was this picture, where was this picture taken?
This was in South Beach. I believe the building that they were living at the where Charlie's parents were living at.
Is that the icon?
I don't think that was an icon. It was somewhere in First and Ocean.
Okay, so a different residence.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And this photo, was this the first time you'd ever met Wendi, or had you already known Wendi before this photo?
I met her one time prior to this because I believe this was in Father's Day. So I met her around spring break when I had dinner with her and Jeffrey.
Okay. So the Yardbird restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this was the second time you'd met her.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a relationship with her outside of her being Charlie's sister?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you communicate with her by phone or through any apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive?
I will answer Maui's question real quick. I mean, do I believe Katherine Magbanua's testimony? I obviously agree that what she's saying now makes a lot more sense and is more in agreement with all of the evidence. So in general, I do agree. I mean, I agree that she should have admitted before and that she now admits that she was part of this murder. I don't see why she would throw Sigfredo under the bus. If he wasn't involved in the murder. I do feel that there's a lot of details missing, and that's the part that I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding, and I'm reanalyzing. Is it where she seems to minimize her role in the murder a little bit? And so I'm trying to figure out, is she lying about that? Is she trying to make herself look not so bad? Because it is, of course, very difficult to admit that you were directly a part of the murder, that you were involved in the moments before the murder, that you were just helping a killer actually go ahead and kill a human being. So is she minimizing, or is she telling the truth when she says that she wasn't as involved as we all thought she was? So that's really what I'm trying to figure out. I do, of course, I don't see a reason why she would make up her involvement now just to get a deal. Obviously, she was involved. But I don't know that I believe her 100%. And that's why I want to reanalyze and see whether there is any corroboration to her testimony. Thanks for the question, Maui.
I met her one time prior to this because I believe this was in Father's Day. So I met her around spring break when I had dinner with her and Jeffrey.
Okay. So the Yardbird restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this was the second time you'd met her.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a relationship with her outside of her being Charlie's sister?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you communicate with her by phone or through any apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive any communication from her specifically about the homicide?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did Wendi ever give you any money or other gifts?
No, ma'am, she did not.
Of her being
Maybe one thing is, one of the questions that everybody has is, did Wendi let Katherine Magbanua know that the murder had been done? Because Sigfredo Garcia says that he called his ex, Katie, to let her know that the job was done, and that she responded, well, it wasn't Sigfredo Garcia who said this. Luis Rivera said that he overheard the conversation between Katherine Magbanua and Sigfredo Garcia. That Sigfredo Garcia had called Katie, told her the job was done, and that Katie responds, I know. And this was, of course, about an hour and a half or so after the hit had been done. And at that time, supposedly, Wendi Adelson may have been close to the scene of the shooting. So there was a question, did Wendi Adelson let Katherine Magbanua directly, not through Charlie, but directly, did Wendi Adelson let Katherine Magbanua know that something had been done? And so Katie is actually refuting that. She's saying she had no direct communications with Wendi Adelson in any way, via WhatsApp or any other way. So she's refused, she's not supporting, I guess, this theory that Wendi would have let Katherine Magbanua know. Of course, it is possible that he could have let someone else know and that someone else would have let Katie know, but you can see that from Katie's testimony, she's not implicating Wendi Adelson as the person who gave her that information. In fact, I think she doesn't even acknowledge having that information at all. So let's keep listening.
Ocean.
okay, so a different residence.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And this photo, was this the first time you'd ever met Wendi, or had you already known Wendi before this photo?
I met her one time prior to this because I believe this was in Father's Day. So I met her around spring break when I had dinner with her and Jeffrey.
Okay. So the Yardbird restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this was the second time you'd met her.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have a relationship with her outside of her being Charlie's sister?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you communicate with her by phone or through any apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive any communication from her specifically about the homicide?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did Wendi ever give you any money or other gifts?
No, ma'am, she did not.
Did anybody pay you for your part in the murder other than Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am, they did not.
All right. And the payments.
Okay, now this is actually a pretty useful testimony for Donna, for Wendi, for Harvey. She's only implicating Charles Adelson as paying for the hit, although in a second she will acknowledge the fact that the checks that she received from the Adelson Institute were signed by Donna. But as far as directly, hey, I need to get paid for this, she's only implicating Charles Adelson.
Apps or anything like that?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you receive any communication from her specifically about the homicide?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did Wendi ever give you any money or other gifts?
No, ma'am, she did not.
Did anybody pay you for your part in the murder other than Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am, they did not.
All right. And the payments from Charlie Adelson, did those include the checks that were signed by his mother from
Yes,
the Adelson
ma'am.
Institute?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Did you perform any job at the Adelson Institute?
No, ma'am, I did not.
You didn't go up there and clean on the weekends?
No, ma'am, I did not.
On the night of the murder, did you go to the defendant's house?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And where was that house, or what house was that?
That was in Whale Harbor in Fort Lauderdale.
All right. And did you get payment for the murder that night?
I believe it was the following morning.
Were you in a panic when you arrived at his house?
Was I in a panic?
In a panic.
I wasn't in a panic, but Charlie was.
Okay. Explain that. How was he acting?
When I opened the door, he was kind of frantic and he had a gun in his hand and he was just all over the place.
Was that normal behavior for him?
Not having a gun in his hand, no, ma'am.
All right. Did you know him to have a gun prior to that?
Yes, ma'am. He has a gun safe.
All right. But he just didn't usually carry around in his hand?
Yeah, he's never had it in his hand.
Turn the phone off, please.
So this part is quite curious because, in essence, Charles Adelson is going to use this as part of his story, and it seems to be that it was true, right? That he was freaking out that night. But he changes it, right? He says he was freaking out after Katherine Magbanua tells him that he's going to be extorted. And interestingly, what Katherine says is that when she arrived over there, he was acting a little bit crazy. He had a gun. He was excited, I guess is the word that Georgia Kaplan is trying to put in her mouth. And so I thought about that issue, and it could be, of course, many things. It could be that he was self-medicating for that. He just found out that this thing that he had put in place, and that maybe until it's done, maybe it doesn't hit you as hard as after you do it. Maybe this was a reaction to the realization that he did something so horrible. It could be a reaction to learning from his mom and dad that Dan Markel was still alive, and concerns about that issue, about possibly the killers being found out. So there's many reasons why he might have been acting this way that night.
What was he saying to you when he was in this frantic state?
I can't really recall because he had given me some Xanax, so it was a little blurry that night, and I just fell asleep. I think we both fell asleep. So,
all right. Can you tell the jury whether the excitement that he was showing had to do with the murder or something else?
Yes, ma'am. It had to do with that.
Okay. Was anybody else there at his residence when you arrived?
At that day, no, ma'am.
Okay. Did you ever see his parents at the residence?
No, I didn't see his parents.
Okay. How was the money packaged when you got it? I think you said you got it the next morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How was it packaged?
It was in a plastic. The money was in a plastic bag, like a Ziploc bag, that was inside a brown bag, and then like a grocery bag over it.
And was the money stapled?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Can you explain how it was stapled? Like what size bills and what increments were stapled together?
I believe it was stapled, and I never counted it, but it was like in a stack, and it was stapled in the corner.
All right. Were they $100 bills or something else?
They were $100 bills, and there was some 20s and 50s.
Okay. And was the money damp?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Explain what you mean to the jury.
A couple days after that, I went and I opened the bag and I called Sigfredo and I told him, I was like, there's mold on this money. And he's like, well, blow dry it. And I was like, well, why would there be mold on the money? And he's just, I don't know, just blow dry it. So a brown bag and then like a grocery bag over it.
And was the money stapled?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Can you explain how it was stapled? Like what size bills and what increments were stapled together?
I believe it was stapled in, I never counted it, but it was like in a stack and it was stapled in the corner.
All right, were they $100 bills or something else?
They were $100 bills and there was some 20s and 50s.
Okay. And was the money damp?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Explain what you mean to the jury.
A couple days after that, I went and I opened the bag and I called Sigfredo and I told him, I was like, there's mold on this money. And he's like, well, blow dry it. And I was like, but why would there be mold on the money? And he's just, I don't know, just blow dry it. So I believe his parents or his mom might have washed the money.
You mean like physically wash the money?
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you think his mom did it?
Because he was always adamant about telling me he didn't have any money in his house. And he told me that his parents had just stopped by right before I got there. So
Okay.
all of a sudden he had money to put in the trunk of my car the
Was
following
the
morning.
money, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm sorry.
Was the money already sorted out and packaged when you first saw it, or was he doing?
So this part's important that it does involve Donna, and she says this is very important, right? She says that Charles told her that just before she got to his place, that Harvey and Donna had stopped by his house. And I think that is corroborated somewhat by the cell phone records that were analyzed by Mr. Corbett, Sergeant Corbett. Additionally, she talks about the damp money, and she gives some surprising testimony because it was always assumed. I mean, in fact, it was admitted, right? There was an admission by Charles Adelson at trial that was his money, that he loved cash, that he kept a lot of cash. So there's an inconsistency between the testimony of Charles Adelson, between the testimony of Katherine Magbanua, and between the testimony of June Umchinda. So June Umchinda says he had cash at the safe and that he kept it stapled. Katherine Magbanua says something different. She says that Charles was telling her, it could be a lie, of course, it could be that she's saying the truth, that Charlie was telling her, hey, I don't have any cash at home, maybe because he didn't fully trust Katherine Magbanua, maybe because he knew that Katherine Magbanua was helping him set up a murder, so he didn't want to be robbed by the bad people that he was bringing into his life. But supposedly, Charles Adelson was telling her, I don't have any money at home. And so she says, from all those things, she's allowed to make a conclusion here, and it's a little strange that there was no objection to any of this. But so in essence, at the trial, Katherine Magbanua offers a conclusion, right? So from the testimony that she gives, she says, Charles told me that his parents had just stopped by. The money was wet. I don't have, in the past, Charles told me that he never kept any cash at home. And so therefore, it must have been that the parents were the ones who washed the money, brought it over, and that's the money that was put in several bags and was put in her trunk the next morning. It is interesting also to note, and I don't know if that's a mistake by her or not, but it seems that she kept the bag, right? Because she says a couple of days later, I opened the bag and some of the money was moldy, or there was mold in the money. And she calls Sigfredo, and Sigfredo tells her to blow dry it. So those are little interesting details that came out in this little portion. That's why I wanted to go back and listen again and make sure that all of us catch them. So here we go.
Washed the money?
You mean like physically wash the money?
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you think his mom did it?
Because he was always adamant about telling me he didn't have any money in his house. And he told me that his parents had just stopped by right before I got there. So
Okay.
all of a sudden he had money to put in the trunk of my car the
Was
following
the
morning.
money, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm sorry.
Was the money already sorted out and packaged when you first saw it, or was he doing that?
No, it was already stacked and sorted out.
Okay. And did he have to, so he didn't have to go anywhere to get the money. He already had it when you arrived.
Yes, ma'am.
Was there any argument that night about the money or the next morning?
With me and Charlie?
Yes.
No.
Did you, I guess you did stay there that night? You may have already said that.
Yes, I fell asleep.
Was there any argument with the defendant at all about anything that night?
No, ma'am. Not that I can recall.
Did you threaten him in any way?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Judge, maybe you could sign off.
Sir?
You may continue with your examination.
Did you, the night that you went to get the money,
I do want to point out something here. You got to remember that Georgia Capelman now is trying to adapt the direct examination of Katherine Magbanua based on what she learned from Dan Markel in the opening statements. So Dan Markel, throughout this bomb on the trial, right, that Charles Adelson was going to raise this extortion defense. And so Georgia Capelman, as you can see here, she's adapting to that piece of information, to this defense, and she's anticipating what might Charles Adelson testify on that issue, right? What is he going to claim happened that night, right? And from the opening statement, then Rashbaum gave us a preview, more or less, of what Charles Adelson's story was going to be. So now, before even Charles testified, Georgia Capelman is addressing the issue in trying to put a hole in whatever story later Charles will tell when he gets on the witness stand.
argument that night about the money or the next morning?
With me and Charlie?
Yes.
No.
Did you, I guess you did stay there that night? You may have already said that.
Yes, I fell asleep.
Was there any argument with the defendant at all about anything that night?
No, ma'am. Not that I can recall.
Did you threaten him in any way?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Judge, maybe you could sign off.
Sir?
You may continue with your examination.
Did you, the night that you went to get the money, did you threaten Charlie Adelson in any way?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you try to extort money out of him?
No, ma'am, I did not.
The money that he gave you, is that something that had already been discussed or agreed upon in reference to this homicide?
Well, I believe yes, because it was going to be payment for this.
You weren't, well, were you sent with a message from Sigfredo to tell him he better give it up or else?
No, ma'am.
Did you relay to the defendant that his family was in danger if he didn't give you whatever it was you were asking for?
No, ma'am.
How did Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera get paid for their part in this murder?
That morning, when I woke up, I was like, oh my God, I gotta go. So I drove back down and I was trying to look for Sigfredo and having a hard time that morning. And then eventually I made it to the alleyway of where Lewis's building was.
Was that on
North Miami,
yes,
in like 135th.
where he lived with Jessica?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
And I was just waiting in the car, and all of a sudden Sigfredo just like popped up and got inside the passenger seat.
All right, so they got their money from you.
Yes, ma'am. Sigfredo did.
And Rivera got paid as well, didn't he?
I believe so, yes.
All right, I want to draw your attention to what we're calling the bump. You know what we're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After the bump and the subsequent conversations were occurring, did you have any contact with any other Adelson about the bump other than Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am.
So you didn't talk to Wendi about it?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Didn't talk to Harvey or Donna about it?
No, ma'am, I did not.
On the Dolce Vita meeting, do you recall what meeting I'm referencing?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Was that a restaurant that you met Charlie at after the bump?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In that meeting, and the jury hasn't heard this yet, but he's saying one of two scenarios. This is one of two scenarios. You
Yes,
remember that?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What were the one of two scenarios? What were the two scenarios?
What he was speaking of was probably the FBI
Mhm.
or Tato blackmailing
And by
their
Tato,
family.
you mean Rivera.
Louis Rivera. Yes, ma'am.
Were you concerned about that as well?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And what did you do to try to figure out who it was that had approached Donna Adelson?
I asked Sigfredo.
So he was supposed to be looking into it.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you there whenever he did whatever he did to try to find out who it was?
Was I where?
Were you present when Sigfredo, I guess, went out and talked to people about whether?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Because at that time, was Rivera in custody?
Yes, ma'am. He was already doing his federal sentence, I believe.
So was the concern that maybe some of his associates might have done this?
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe he had run his mouth about it?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you reviewed what I had marked for U.S. States Exhibit 111, the Dolce Vita recording with the transcript attached?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And does the transcript in that exhibit accurately reflect the words that were said at that meeting between yourself and the defendant, Garcia, about this bump? Did you speak in code?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what was the purpose of speaking in code?
Kind of just piggybacked with what Charlie was speaking to me in code. So I kind of was like, okay, if he's talking in codes, kind of speaking codes as well.
Was the concern that the calls could be being recorded?
My concern was more that I was at work. So I really didn't want to say any phone numbers out loud or speak of what was going on.
I'm going to approach and show you what I've marked as state's demonstrative A. Have you seen this before? I don't know if you have.
No, ma'am, I have not.
All right. And it's got several items listed here as code words with the actual meaning next to them.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you take a moment to and the ones in red are the ones used by you. The ones in yellow are used by Charlie Adelson.
Okay.
Will you review this exhibit and just tell me if it's accurate as far as what the code means?
Yes, ma'am, it's accurate.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to make use of state's demonstrative A.
Any objection?
Yeah, I see it.
May I publish?
You may.
All right, so the first one we have is $65.70. And again, jury hasn't heard these calls yet, but when you were talking to Sigfredo Garcia about $65.70, were you referring to the undercover phone number?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And then when you're talking to Charlie about an agent were you talking about? It seems like you're talking about real estate agent, but are you talking about the undercover agent that approached his mother?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Right. And the CD, was that reference to a recording that the Adelsons made of their contact with the undercover?
A recording of their contact with them,
Yes.
that they were being recorded?
No, that they called the undercover phone
Yes,
number
ma'am.
and recorded it.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever actually hear that recording?
No, ma'am, not until my trial.
And then the client, there's a lot of discussion about this client or this tenant. You need to find out if this is going to be a good tenant or a bad tenant.
Yes, ma'am.
Was the tenant this person, if it really was a blackmailer, this thug that's somehow affiliated with Rivera?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, the false lead or the phishing, what is that? What did that mean? There's a lot of discussion about, I hope it's just somebody phishing. You remember that?
From the phone calls?
Yes, this is all from the phone call.
Yes, ma'am.
It was one of the two scenarios that it could be law enforcement.
Yes, ma'am. But this was Charlie basically saying this the whole time. He's the one who's coming up with all the scenarios.
Okay, but when he's talking about the scenarios, he's talking about phishing.
Yes,
He
ma'am.
doesn't say law enforcement phishing.
No, ma'am.
He says it could be, a tenant or a patient or something like that.
Anything but what?
Judge, I'm just gonna object to the leading.
Please rephrase your questions.
Ms. Kappelman, sustained.
How about the listing or the properties? What did that refer to?
About the paperwork. That's pretty
Like
accurate.
looking into a listing.
Yes, the listing, because I worked in a real estate agency at that time. So he was just telling me, look into the listing. Oh, this will be a good investment. So it was really Charlie saying all these words.
What did the good and what might the good can't talk. What might the good investment have been?
If he had a good lead.
If it was a blackmailer
Yes.
that you could pay off.
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Rule.
Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. All right, we talked about the two scenarios. The paperwork, what was that?
That was the paper that was handed to his mom by the undercover.
On the Dolce restaurant meeting, we see Charlie Adelson pull out a piece of paper. Was
Yes,
that the actual piece of paper that was handed to his mother?
I believe so. I just never saw it. He never showed it to me.
Okay. Did he give you a phone number off of that piece of
He
paper?
did. That was that phone number that we just can't seem to get right.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
6570.
Okay. At any time after, I know we talked about the night of the money, that you got the money. But at any time after that, did you ever blackmail Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you ever threaten him in any way?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you relay any threats on behalf of Sigfredo Garcia?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did anyone ever make you extort any money or other favors out of Charlie Adelson?
No, ma'am.
Before the murder, had you bragged to Garcia and or Rivera about my new rich boyfriend?
I didn't even know he had money like that.
Well, I mean, he had a,
I mean, he had a good job and, he had a nice house, but I wasn't aware of how, how much money he has.
okay, but he definitely had more than Sigfredo Garcia.
Oh, yes, ma'am, he did.
Okay, and did you brag to Garcia like, oh, I got a new, better guy?
I'm pretty sure he saw that I was happy and I was, going out to dinners and hanging out with him. So,
Okay. But did you tell them specifically he's got a lot of money?
No, I did not.
Did you tell them specifically he's got this issue with his sister's ex-husband?
I believe I mentioned it. Yes, I
Okay.
did.
And when you talked to them about he's got this issue with the sister's ex-husband, was that in the context of hiring them to do the murder, or just in?
Just in general.
Okay, so
Just-
they were aware that he had this issue.
Well, Sigfredo was, yes.
Okay. Did you ever talk to Rivera about it?
No, I did not.
Okay. And when you talked to Sigfredo about it, did he ever say, well, I think I'll just drive to Tallahassee and kill the guy, or anything like that?
No, ma'am, he did not.
Is that something he would have mentioned to you if that was his idea?
Sigfredo doesn't say a lot of things to me, and he likes to keep a lot of things away from me. So he would have
Okay.
never asked me that or told me that.
Okay. But in this case, I guess, okay. So is it possible that Sigfredo and Rivera came to Tallahassee and did this killing without any communication from you or Charlie Adelson, just on their own?
No, ma'am.
And then
That would be-
extorted Charlie Adelson through you to get money because they had killed the guy?
No, that'd be impossible. How would they have any information?
Well, they could have seen it on the internet.
No. I don't think so.
When you were talking about Wendy's husband and the problems with him to Sigfredo Garcia, I know you've already said this, but I just want to be crystal clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say the name Dan Markel?
No, ma'am. I never knew Dan Markel's name.
How was the name Dan Markel, the location and name of the target for this killing, provided to the killers?
I believe it was all the information that was given to Sigfredo, which I got from Charlie, was all in that paper.
Paper provided by this defendant.
Yes, ma'am. Inside the envelope.
May I have a moment to confer?
Go ahead.
So I'm gonna keep calling out, I guess, since what is the name? Nico
Cross-examination.
from plastic called me out for supposedly mispronouncing the name of Katherine Magbanua. And then, sorry, but you wrote here that everybody said that she graduated from FSU. Sorry, that makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about. I'm kidding. No, she actually supposedly graduated from UCF and then moved to South Florida after graduating. I am interested in seeing what record you're looking at that says that she only graduated high school. That's interesting. I wonder if she lied when she said that she graduated from UCF. But the undergraduate school was not FSU. Please do not insult Florida State University. It is actually my alma mater for undergrad, is UCF, the University of Central Florida. That's where I actually went to school for undergraduate as well. So she and Charles both are bringing shame on the Knights because both of them attended UCF just like I did for undergraduate. Sadly. Here we go. Let's watch the cross-examination now.
Now, you were arrested and charged with the murder of Professor Markel on October 1, 2016, correct?
Yes, sir.
Almost immediately, the state talked to your lawyers and offered you full immunity, a get-out-of-jail-free card, right?
I don't know if that was immediately.
Pretty soon after you got arrested, you were offered to cooperate against Charlie Adelson and the other Adelsons, and you would get to go home to your kids, right?
Yes, sir.
And your lawyers told you about that offer.
Yes, sir, they did.
You also saw an interview on TV while you were in jail in which one of the prosecutors mentioned this immunity offer, right?
Yes, sir.
You have 2 kids who are your world, right?
Yes, sir.
If you took the state's deal, then you would have been let out of jail immediately, right? That's what your lawyers told you.
If I took their deal? Yes, sir.
But you didn't take the offer.
No, I didn't.
Instead, you stayed in jail for 3 years before your first trial, right?
Yes, sir.
You stayed in jail through COVID after your first trial hung.
Yes, sir.
You still didn't cooperate. The deal was still open, right?
Well, the deal was to give up Charlie,
And you couldn't do that.
because in order to give up Charlie, I had to give up Sigfredo, the father of my children, so I couldn't do that.
So while you're in jail, sitting in jail, during COVID, you knew there was still a deal possibility open for you, right? You could still take a deal. Your lawyers told you that.
Before COVID, after my mistrial?
Yes.
I believe so.
And you still didn't take the deal, right?
No.
Charlie Adelson didn't force you to take the deal, not take the deal, right?
No, I had no communication with Charlie.
He didn't pay for your attorneys.
He didn't pay for my attorneys, but there was word that my brother declined him paying for my attorneys.
Ma'am.
It had anything to do with him.
I know you have an agenda here, but just answer my questions.
Yes, sir.
Did Charlie Adelson pay for your attorneys?
No, sir, he did not.
Did anyone in the Adelson family pay for your attorneys?
No, sir.
Did anyone in the Adelson family pay any money to your kids?
No, sir.
You had nothing to do with Charlie Adelson, right? After the bump.
This is really interesting because there was, of course, a lot of speculation, and I may have mentioned it myself. We thought that it would make perfect sense that the Adelsons were funding the defense of Katherine Magbanua. Yet, I don't know if it's 100% true. I don't take whatever she says as 100% true. She could be trying to protect somebody, but she denies the fact that the Adelsons were funding her defense.
No, sir, I did not. My brother declined him paying for my attorneys. It
Ma'am.
had anything to do with him.
I know you have an agenda here, but just answer my questions.
Yes, sir.
Did Charlie Adelson pay for your attorneys?
No, sir, he did not.
Did anyone in the Adelson family pay for your attorneys?
No, sir.
Did anyone in the Adelson family pay any money to your kids?
No, sir.
You had nothing to do with Charlie Adelson, right? After the bump.
No, sir, I did not.
Now, the real reason you didn't cooperate, and you made it clear, is because Charlie Adelson had absolutely nothing to do with the murder of Professor Markel. Isn't that the case?
I didn't cooperate because in order to give up Charlie, I'd have to give up Sigfredo.
Well, let's talk about the testimony in your first trial. And don't worry, we're going to get to your proffers as well.
Okay.
But let's talk about the testimony in your first trial. You were asked, did you get the father of your children, Mr. Garcia, to commit a murder on behalf of Mr. Charlie Adelson? Answer, no, ma'am. Do you recall saying that?
Yes, sir.
You were asked, do you have information that Charlie Adelson was involved in this? Answer, do I have information? I don't have personal information. Do you recall that?
No, sir, I did not.
You don't recall saying that in your first trial?
No, sir, I did not.
Would you like to see a transcript of
Yes,
it?
I will.
I will confirm, I just checked, Ladybug just checked on this Meet an Inmate website where there is the profile of Katherine Magbanua. Indeed, it says in there, under education, high school degree. So it does not mention her college degree. Of course, maybe she's trying to improve her profile for writing, doesn't want to intimidate guys or ladies or whoever she wants to write to her. So maybe that's why. Or maybe it is true. Maybe it is true that she did not graduate from UCF. But the testimony before, under oath, was that she did graduate from UCF with a degree in something with the health administration, I believe it was. And who knows how accurate that website is, right?
I'll direct your attention to page 2800, lines 1 through 5.
Please read to yourself, ma'am.
Does that refresh your recollection that that's
Yes.
what you said?
Yes, sir, it does.
During your second trial, do you recall being asked, Charlie didn't ask you to do anything weird? Answer, no, ma'am. Like get someone to get a hitman to commit a murder of his ex-brother-in-law? No, ma'am. Do you recall those questions and that answer?
Yes, sir, I do.
Because you couldn't implicate Charlie, you went to trial, and the first trial hung. Isn't that the case?
Yes, sir.
A few weeks before your second trial, Charlie was arrested.
Yes,
Isn't that
sir.
the case?
Yes, sir.
The state waited and waited and waited for you to cooperate, and then they arrested him on the eve of your trial when you made it clear you weren't going to cooperate, right?
Yes, sir.
So you went to trial the second time, and this time you were convicted.
Yes, sir.
And you were convicted of first-degree murder and other charges, right?
Yes, sir.
A few weeks after your conviction, you were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus another 30 years. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
And you were transferred from the jail in Leon County to the state prison where you would spend the rest of your life, right?
Yes, sir.
Away from your family,
Yes, sir.
away from your children.
Yes, sir.
And you realize that there are only two ways to get out of that prison, right?
What are the two ways?
Well, one way was in a coffin, right?
Yes, sir.
And the other way was cooperating against Charlie Adelson, right?
No, sir. I wanted the truth to finally come out.
What are the only two ways that you can ever get out of prison, Miss Magbanua?
My appeal?
Oh, well, we'll get to that too. You have an appeal pending right now, right?
Yes, sir.
That claims that you're innocent.
Yes, sir.
Let's just make this clear to the jury. Ms. Kappelman has called you as a witness against this man who's presumed innocent. You've just testified that you did a murder, and you have an appeal pending right now in this county claiming your innocence. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
And lo and behold, weeks after you were convicted and sentenced to life with no parole, you went in and met with the state, right?
Yes, sir.
And you met with them not once, but twice. Spend the rest of your life, right?
Yes, sir.
Away from your family,
Yes, sir.
away from your children.
Yes, sir.
And you realize that there are only two ways to get out of that prison, right?
What are the two ways?
Well, one way was in a coffin, right?
Yes, sir.
And the other way was cooperating against Charlie Adelson, right?
No, sir. I wanted the truth to finally come out.
What are the only two ways that you can ever get out of prison, Miss Magbanua?
My appeal?
Oh, well, we'll get to that too. You have an appeal pending right now, right?
Yes, sir.
That claims that you're innocent.
Yes, sir.
Let's just make this clear to the jury. Ms. Kappelman has called you as a witness against this man who's presumed innocent. You've just testified that you did a murder, and you have an appeal pending right now in this county claiming your innocence. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
And lo and behold, weeks after you were convicted and sentenced to life with no parole, you went in and met with the state, right?
Yes, sir.
And you met with them not once, but twice.
Yes, sir.
And you met with them for hours,
Yes, sir.
a combined total of around 6 hours, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to get into that and all the lies that Ms. Kappelman didn't go through with you that you made during those interviews, but let's go back to the first trials first, okay? In each of those trials, you took the stand for your own defense, right?
Yes, sir.
And you took the same oath and looked at different jurors the same way that you look today, right?
Yes, sir.
And in your second trial, not only did you take an oath in this room, but isn't it true that you tried to get Sigfredo to lie for you?
No, sir, I did not.
Isn't it true that you were caught on a recording in the prison in which you were going to have Sigfredo Garcia come into your trial, your second trial, and say that he did the murder with Charlie Adelson all by himself?
No, sir.
You never were on a recording of
Never
that
said
fact.
that.
Your plan at your second trial wasn't to have Sigfredo Garcia testify on your behalf?
No, sir.
Are you aware that your lawyer opened up on that plan?
No,
In her
sir, I'm not
opening?
aware. No.
Well, did you sit through the trial?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you sit through the trial when she said to the jury, you're going to hear from Sigfredo Garcia, who's going to say that the murder was between him and Charlie Adelson, and that you're just a victim of having bad taste in men?
He never came up.
He refused to come and testify, right?
I don't know if he refused. He was never called.
Are you aware that you and your lawyer subpoenaed him to come down to Leon County to testify on your behalf?
He was subpoenaed, but he just never showed up.
And he didn't
He
show
never
up?
took the stand.
Right. He was subpoenaed by you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you got on the phone with him. You were caught because you're not supposed to talk to each other, right?
Yes, sir.
But you guys talk to each other because what you do is you call his mom, right?
Yes, sir.
And he calls his mom. Isn't that what you all do?
At that time, yes, sir.
Yeah, you call each other so that you could talk to each other through the mom. And during one of those calls, you asked him to come testify on your behalf. Isn't that what you did?
No, I did not ask him.
Well, we'll move on to some other lies. In the prison in which you were going to have Sigfredo Garcia come into your trial, your second trial, and say that he did the murder with Charlie Adelson all by himself.
No, sir.
You never were on a recording of
Never
that
said
fact.
that.
Your plan at your second trial wasn't to have Sigfredo Garcia testify on your behalf?
No, sir.
Are you aware that your lawyer opened up on that plan?
No,
In her
sir, I'm not
opening?
aware. No.
Well, did you sit through the trial?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you sit through the trial when she said to the jury, you're going to hear from Sigfredo Garcia, who's going to say that the murder was between him and Charlie Adelson, and that you're just a victim of having bad taste in men?
He never came up.
He refused to come and testify, right?
I don't know if he refused. He was never called.
Are you aware that you and your lawyer subpoenaed him to come down to Leon County to testify on your behalf?
He was subpoenaed, but he just never showed up.
And he didn't
He
show
never
up?
took the stand.
Right. He was subpoenaed by you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you got on the phone with him. You were caught because you're not supposed to talk to each other, right?
Yes, sir.
But you guys talk to each other because what you do is you call his mom, right?
Yes, sir.
And he calls his mom. Isn't that what you all do?
At that time, yes, sir.
Yeah, you call each other so that you could talk to each other through the mom. And during one of those calls, you asked him to come testify on your behalf. Isn't that what you did?
No, I did not ask him.
Well, we'll move on to some other lies.
What a pity, right? That Dan Markel didn't play that phone call at this trial. He could have and didn't. It would have been a good moment to try to impeach Katie with the trial. Of course, we don't know exactly what was said. We have requested a copy of those phone calls. I have requested it from the state attorney's office here locally. I sent them some case law explaining why it should be relevant, it should be disclosed. They have disclosed all the other jail calls, but didn't give me those yet. I'm going to keep trying, but it would have been nice if Dan Markel had played that at the trial.
During your first trial, you didn't ask Mr. Garcia to help this lady get her kids back in Tallahassee. Answer, no, ma'am. You didn't solicit him to commit a murder of Dan Markel. Answer, no, ma'am. Do you recall those questions and answers?
Yes, sir.
You were asked, well, back then, did you know someone by the name of Dan Markel? Answer, no, ma'am. In 2014, you learned that Wendi Adelson's divorce was already finalized, right? I learned that in court. I didn't know it before. Do you remember those
Yes, sir.
those words? Those were lies, right?
Yes, I lied in my trials to save myself.
We'll keep going. You lied when you said that Charlie told you that Professor Markel had been in an accident, right?
I lied that. Say it again, sir.
Well, I'll ask you the questions. Do you remember having a conversation with Charlie Adelson about his brother-in-law being in an accident? Does that sound familiar to you? It
Yeah.
sounds familiar. Yeah, that was a lie, right?
No, that's what Charlie said.
He
It
told
was-
you that he was in an accident. He'd tell you that there was a murder.
No, he told me he was in an accident.
So you didn't know about the murder of Dan Markel on July 18th. Is that what you're telling this jury?
No, not at that time.
When did you find out about the murder of Dan Markel?
It was later on.
Oh, really? So the money that you brought to the guys that Miss Kappelman brought up on opening, the money you brought up to the guys on July 19th, it was because Dan Markel was in an accident?
I didn't know that that was Dan Markel. Like, I didn't know his name.
Oh.
But there was a
Oh.
murder that happened, yes.
At the March 11th dinner that you had with Mr. Lacoste at Yardbird, Dan Markel's name wasn't mentioned?
No, sir.
Would it surprise you that Mr. Lacoste has testified to the opposite of that?
No, I haven't seen his testimony.
At your first trial, you were asked, did Charlie mention anything to you about a murder out of Tallahassee? So now it's not Dan Markel. It's just a murder out of Tallahassee. And your answer was no, ma'am. Question, did he mention anything about his ex-brother-in-law being murdered? Answer, no, ma'am. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, sir.
And those were lies, right?
Yes, I told you I lied. I lied in my trials to save myself.
I understand. Please let me keep going through them. There's a lot of them, so we'll take our time.
Yes, sir.
Now, you said you never saw any cash at Charlie's place. Do you recall that at trial?
He had cash, but I didn't know how much he had. I know he keeps cash in his safe.
But I thought you just testified moments ago that you never saw cash at his place. They didn't keep cash at his place. That supposedly his parents had to bring the cash. Isn't that what you just told this jury about 18 minutes ago?
An abundance of cash.
And brought up on opening, the money you brought up to the guys on July 19th, it was because Dan Markel was in an accident?
I didn't know that was Dan Markel. Like, I didn't know his name.
Oh.
But there was a
Oh.
murder that happened, yes.
At the March 11th dinner that you had with Mr. Lacoste at Yardbird, Dan Markel's name wasn't mentioned?
No, sir.
Would it surprise you that Mr. Lacoste has testified to the opposite of that?
No, I haven't seen his testimony.
At your first trial, you were asked, did Charlie mention anything to you about a murder out of Tallahassee? So now it's not Dan Markel. It's just a murder out of Tallahassee. And your answer was no, ma'am. Question, did he mention anything about his ex-brother-in-law being murdered? Answer, no, ma'am. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, sir.
And those were lies, right?
Yes, I told you I lied. I lied in my trials to save myself.
I understand. Please let me keep going through them. There's a lot of them, so we'll take our time.
Yes, sir.
Now, you said you never saw any cash at Charlie's place. Do you recall that at trial?
He had cash, but I didn't know how much he had. I know he keeps cash in his safe.
But I thought you just testified moments ago that you never saw cash at his place. They didn't keep cash at his place. That supposedly his parents had to bring the cash. Isn't that what you just told this jury about 18 minutes ago?
An abundance of cash.
Have you seen a safe?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever seen it open?
Yes, sir.
doesn't he keep a lot of cash that he collects on the top of his safe?
I mean, I'm not like looking in it, but every single time we used to go out, he used to grab some money from the safe and then take it with him.
Repeatedly during both trials, you said you worked at the Adelson Institute. You never worked at the Adelson Institute,
No,
right?
sir, I did not.
Now we're going to hear about a Lexus.
Yes, sir.
You said you paid for that Lexus. You never paid for that Lexus. Isn't that
I
the case?
paid Charlie cash for that Lexus.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I think the state might disagree. Has the state disagreed with you on that point?
About me paying him cash? Yes, because there was nothing that was coming out of my account, but I paid him cash. I had the cash on me.
During the trial, first trial, you were asked, do you know why it is that Charlie chose you out of all of his ex-girlfriends to call? I don't know why he called me. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, sir.
That was a lie, right?
I told you I lied in my first and second trial to save myself.
Well, let's get to the second trial. Just like you're lying here to save yourself, right?
I'm not saving myself. I'm telling the truth this time.
Right, because now all of a sudden, after 8 years, you have developed a conscience. I think that's what you told the jury.
No, it's because the father of my children was on death penalty at that time on my first trial. So I couldn't give up. If it was just Charlie, like I said from the trial, go ahead and arrest him. Nobody ever did.
He didn't get the death penalty after the first trial, and he was convicted, right?
Yes, sir.
And by the time of his second trial, you had no reason to protect him anymore. He was done.
No, sir. He was under appeal.
Okay, just like you're under appeal now.
Yes, sir.
So what you said to this jury about 20 minutes ago is you said to this jury, I'm here today to tell the truth, and I want to get your exact words. Because I want to do the right thing.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it because you want to go home? And that's the only way that you could ever go home is to help them. That's the only way you can go home, by not being dead.
I was not promised anything. I'm doing this solely on myself. Clearly, you don't even see my attorneys in this room.
Let's talk about the second trial. Again, you lied when you testified that you didn't know anything about or were involved in the murder of Professor Markel, right?
Yes, sir. I told you I lied in my first and second trial to save myself.
Ma'am, we've heard it. If you could just answer the questions. Did
Yes,
you
sir.
lie?
Yes, sir.
You lied when you testified that you knew nothing about Wendy's divorce, Wendi Adelson's divorce.
Yes, sir.
You lied when you said you didn't pick up money from Charlie's house on July 18th.
Yes, sir.
You lied when you said you knew nothing about stapled cash.
Yes, sir.
You lied when you said you didn't bring the money to Sigfredo or Luis Rivera the next day.
Yes, sir.
You lied again when you said you worked as a personal assistant for Charlie, right?
Yes, sir.
You lied repeatedly when you tried to discuss what had happened, what was being spoken at Dolce Vita, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, now let's talk about the lies that you told that the state didn't go over with you. Let's talk about your proffers, your cooperation.
Yes, sir.
So you were interviewed by the state twice in October and November 2022, correct?
Yes, sir.
And by the way, you've met with them a couple times since then, right?
A couple times,
Have you met with them
After?
since? Yeah, after that point?
probably one time.
You met with Ms. Kappelman?
Yes, yes, sir.
Did Ms. Kappelman ask you about our defense during that meeting?
No, sir.
She didn't ask you about whether, for the first time, whether you ever threatened
No,
Charlie
sir.
Adelson? Now, when you met with them in October and November of 2022, This was after you got your life sentence, right?
Yes, sir.
And you met with them first in Marion County Jail on October 11th, right?
Marion County Jail? No, sir. I've never been in that county.
You met with them in the jail. I got the wrong jail, obviously.
I've never met with them in any jails.
Where did you meet with them?
I
the
was
first time?
already in DOC
Okay.
in Lowell.
You met with them in prison.
Yes, sir.
Apologies. And the second time, you met with them at the state attorney's office, right? Here in Tallahassee.
Yes, sir.
And both times, Special Agent Sanford was there,
Yes, sir.
Investigator Jason Newland was there,
Yes, sir.
and TPD Investigator Sherry Bennett were there.
Yes, sir.
And they asked you questions.
Yes, sir.
And each time, you told them a version of events that was very different from what you said at your trials, right?
Yes, sir.
In fact, during those 6 hours of interviews, you told them about 5 more versions, right?
5 different versions of it?
Yeah.
No, sir.
Oh, so you told them the same thing throughout the 6 hours that you met with them?
I believe so, but I think the first time you can't even visit more than 2 hours, so I don't know where you're getting 6 hours.
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but let's look. The first interview started at 9:26 a.m. and it ended at 11:44 a.m., so a little over 2 hours.
Yes, sir.
First interview. Your position right now, what you're telling this jury, is that the same thing you told them in the first interview, you told them in the second interview?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
You believe so or you know so?
I know so. I believe so. I believe
You
so.
absolutely know so.
No, I don't, not verbatim exactly what I said.
Is it true that during the entire first interview, you said you had nothing to do with the murder?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
All right, well, we're going to go through exact quotes and we'll see if your memory can be refreshed.
Yes, sir.
By the way, during any of these interviews, did you give them any documentation, anything new? Any text messages, documentation, WhatsApps, any new, as people call it, receipts? Did you give them any new evidence?
No, I'm in prison. I don't have anything.
It was just your words, right?
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about what you said. During the first proffer, which was a little over 2 hours,
Yes, sir.
you raised your hand and they put you under oath, right?
Yes, sir.
And throughout the proffer, the agents, particularly Special Agent Sanford, kept on telling you that you have to tell the truth, right?
Yes, sir.
He didn't believe you.
I mean, whatever his reasons are.
Was he
No.
frustrated with you during the interview?
Yes, sir.
In fact, 1 hour and 8 minutes into the proffer, he said to you that you were minimizing your involvement.
Hold on. What is the objection?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Please, approach. Your examination.
So let's go back. Your position, what you've told this jury, is you are completely consistent. You told the same story during the entire proffer, right?
I can't, like I told you, I can't remember verbatim what I've said from the first proffer and the second proffer.
Let's just talk about the first proffer.
Yes, sir.
Your view is that from the beginning of the first proffer to the end of the first proffer, you said the same thing throughout. That's what you're telling this jury.
From the first proffer to the second proffer that I'm saying the same exact thing. I don't remember verbatim what I've said.
How about from the beginning of the first proffer to the end of the first proffer? What you told the jury is you were consistent from the beginning of the first proffer to the end of the first proffer. Do you recall saying that?
Yes, sir.
Is that still your testimony?
No, I was consistent about it. No, because it was very hard for me to confess what I've done.
So let me ask the question again.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that during the first proffer, for the first 1 hour and 8 minutes, you continued to say that you didn't murder Professor Markel?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
I don't understand your answer. So let me rephrase.
Okay.
Isn't it true that for the first half of the first proffer, you denied participation in the murder of Professor Markel?
No, sir, I was telling him what happened and how my involvement in it.
So your position is that
Yes,
throughout the entire first proffer, you admitted that you participated in the murder of Professor Markel.
Yes, sir.
Judge, may I proceed now?
You may.
Would it surprise you that 1 hour and 8 minutes into the first proffer, Special Agent Sanford said that you were minimizing your involvement in Professor Markel's murder?
Like he stated, I was minimizing it. It was hard for me to confess everything that I've suppressed for the past 7 years.
11 minutes later, he said that what you were telling him made absolutely no sense. Do you recall him saying that?
No, sir, I did not.
Oh, let me see if I can show you. Does this refresh your recollection that Special Agent Sanford said all of it doesn't make sense? I'll withdraw it.
Please allow her to-
Does this refresh your recollection of what Agent Sanford said?
Just the line that you highlighted?
You can read before and after to make sure I'm not doing lawyer tricks.
Yes, sir. Can I?
Of course.
Please yourself, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Yes, Agent Sanford is saying that why am I not remember conversations, specific conversations? And I told him I can't recall those specific conversations.
Was he telling you that what you were saying didn't make sense to him?
I'm going to object to what Agent Sanford said or his opinions.
Sustain, please lay the foundation to impeach specifically.
At some point in the interview, did he walk out on you?
Yes, he did on the second interview.
Yeah, okay. We're going to get to that. That's like 4 hours into your combined interviews, right?
I believe so.
Right? So you come back and I think it's over an hour into the second interview. So actually my math isn't great. It's like 3.5 hours into interviewing. Agent Sanford gets so upset.
Judge, I'm going to object to Agent Sanford's opinions.
I'll
or
rephrase.
actions or words.
He's withdrawing the question. Please move on.
Around 3 hours into these interviews, Agent Sanford decides to leave the room, right?
Yes, sir.
He was frustrated with you, right?
I believe so.
Truthfully, during your first interview, you kept on saying all of these things were jumbled in your head, right?
Yes, sir.
Times. Do you recall that?
I don't recall how many times I said it. No, sir.
You said that eventually, 33 minutes into the interview, you said you arranged through an envelope that Charlie gave you, but that you never opened it for Sigfredo to rough up Professor Markel. Do you recall saying that?
Repeat the question.
33 minutes into the interview,
Yes, sir.
you admitted that you arranged through an envelope that Charlie gave you, but that you never opened
Yes, sir.
for Sigfredo to rough up Professor Markel. Do you recall that?
I've never said Professor Markel's name.
To rough up the deceased.
What do you mean by that? Can you explain?
You told them 33 minutes into the interview
Yes.
that Charlie had given you an envelope that you had never opened, that miraculously got to Sigfredo Garcia, and the purpose of it was to rough up his ex-brother-in-law.
No, because I didn't know what the contents of what was in the envelope, so I wouldn't have said that.
You said that somehow that plan had transitioned to murder, but according to what you told investigators, you never knew when that happened. Do you recall saying that?
Repeat the question again, sir.
You said that somehow the rough-up plan had transitioned to murder.
I never said rough up or any of those words. That's why it's confusing me what you're stating.
Let's say it again.
Yes, sir.
You said that somehow the plan had transitioned to murder, but according to what you told investigators, you never knew when that transition happened.
Well, at that time, I didn't know.
At the time that you were
No,
interviewing?
not in my interview, but when it was happening, as they're interviewing me and we're going through the scenario.
I'm going to show you 186 to 187. You know what? I'll just move on. You told investigators during your first interview, 2 hours into it, 2 hours and 1 minute to be exact,
Yes, sir.
that you never spoke to Charlie about the change in plans,
I never spoke to Charlie about the change in plans.
meaning it going to become a murder.
I'm confused about the questions you're asking. Is this what I said?
Yes, what you said to these investigators just a year ago after you were convicted for life, didn't you tell investigators you didn't know it was going to be a murder?
When we were talking about this, like I said, it was hard for me to confess my involvement in this.
Right, so
Can you show me where I said this?
let's just go with what you just said.
Yes, sir.
So 2 hours into your first interview, when you said this, you still were not admitting that you had a part in the murder.
Yes, it was very hard for me to do this, especially that they came to me in prison where,
Right.
Why are all these investigators coming in?
Okay, so we are now where we started, which is during this first proffer, just a year ago, under oath again, you refused to admit at first that you had anything to do with the murder, that you were a part of the murder.
Yes,
think
sir.
that's-
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard for me to admit it. Yes, sir, it is. It's still hard for me to admit it right now.
Okay. During your first proffer, 9 minutes and 14 seconds into it, do you recall being asked the following questions? And as you saw in trial, Garcia and Rivera made a trip in June. What can you tell us about that? Answer. See, like I don't even remember. I mean, obviously, like you're telling me to, like, remember from what I heard at trial. I learned a lot of things from trial. That's why it's so hard. And I want to say the right thing, but like, I don't remember them going up on a first trip. Do you recall saying that during this proffer?
I don't recall it. If you could show it to me.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Does that refresh your recollection that you said that?
Yes, sir.
You were asked during your proffer on page 68, I don't know how long into it, probably about a third into it. Question, before that trip, you knew that Lewis was going to go with him on that trip. Answer, no, I never knew he was going with him. Do you recall answering that way?
Yes, sir.
You also said during that proffer, 63 minutes in, that you didn't know Luis Rivera was going on the second trip to Tallahassee. Do you recall saying that?
Yes, sir.
During that interview on page 83, you told investigators, this is just a year ago, that on the night of July 18th, you didn't know that Charlie's brother-in-law had been shot.
Can you show me that, sir?
Sure.
Yes, because I'm emphasizing I don't know Dan Markel.
You said that you didn't know that Dan Markel had been shot, right?
Yes, sir.
You told that to investigators a year ago. That's what, on that night, you had no idea that there was a shooting.
Yes, I was partly denying probably still my involvement in it. This is something I've suppressed for a long time, sir.
Now, what's also interesting is when you described July 18th, you said Charlie was panicked.
Yes, sir.
You said he took his Xanax and you took his Xanax.
Yes, sir. He gave me.
You said that he was upset.
I never said he was upset. He was just frantic.
Let's move on to the second proffer.
Yes, sir.
The second proffer was 6 weeks after the first proffer. You recall that?
This is when I came back. I came here.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
And you met with investigators for 3.5 hours this time,
If that's what it states.
from 10:06 in the morning to 1:38 in the afternoon.
Yes, sir.
At the beginning of the interview, you told investigators you didn't know why you were there, right?
Yes, I didn't know what I got pulled out for.
And 15 minutes into the interview, Agent Sanford left the room, right?
Yes, sir.
He didn't come back.
No, sir.
During the interview, you recall being told that you weren't giving the state anything to make them want to do anything for you.
Repeat that question, sir.
Do you recall that during the interview, you were told that you weren't giving the state anything to make them want to do anything for you?
Who stated that?
Investigator Bennett.
Okay, yes, sir.
She was upset.
I mean, we were just talking about the same thing over again.
When she said that you had a real issue, right?
Not that I can recall. What's the issue?
Well, if you didn't help the state and give them something that they could work with, there was only one way you were ever getting out of prison, and that's in a box.
Why do you keep stating that, sir?
You're in jail for the rest of your life, right?
Yes, sir.
If the state doesn't help you, the only way you're getting out of prison is when you die.
But they never said they were going to help me. I wasn't promised
That's not my
anything.
question. What's the only way that you're getting out of prison if the state doesn't help you?
I'll die in prison.
During this second proffer, they asked you, you mean to tell me that you had no clue that he came to Tallahassee? Answer, he never told me he was going to Tallahassee. Do you recall saying that you didn't know that Sigfredo Garcia was going to Tallahassee?
Yes, sir. I never knew he went to Tallahassee.
You never knew Sigfredo Garcia went to Tallahassee?
No, sir.
Okay. During these proffers, you never told the state about monthly payments, did you?
Monthly payments.
That Charlie was making monthly payments to you?
What, the checks from the Adelson Institute?
Yes.
They were aware of that.
How about the cash he was giving you every month?
He wasn't giving me any cash every month.
Oh, really?
Yes.
He wasn't giving you $2,000 of cash every single month that you're heard on the wires trying to accept?
No, sir.
He was just giving you an Adelson Institute check?
Yes, sir. What would the $2,000 be for?
Before he gave you the Adelson Institute checks, you were getting $3,000 a month, right?
No, sir.
It wasn't until 1 hour and 13 minutes in the first proffer that you first admitted that you didn't work for the Adelson Institute, right?
Yes, sir. I lied about it.
In the proffer.
In the proffer, I don't know when I said it, but I lied in my trials about getting those checks from the Adelson Institute. So I said those were checks that I needed to show so that I can get insurance for my children.
You recall them asking you about a meeting with Charlie in the car before Dolce Vita?
Yes, sir.
And you said that you couldn't recall what was discussed?
Yes, sir.
You recall that during the second proffer, you told the state that you didn't know the police were at your door during the wire? And if you had known they were at the door, you would have let them in?
I don't think I mentioned it in that way, but they didn't announce themselves when they were knocking on the door.
In fact, aren't we going to see in the wires that you were hiding from the police?
I was not hiding. I was at home.
Weren't you hiding at home?
From what? I was working from home that day.
Weren't you making a bunch of phone calls to a lot of people saying, the police are at my door, I don't know what to do, I can't answer the door, I'm afraid? Weren't you hiding from them?
Somebody was knocking at the door. They didn't state who they were. So I was calling Sigfredo and nobody was picking up. Then one of his coworkers finally called back and said that there's FBI over there speaking to him and he's going to come by the house.
And he came by the house?
Yes.
And you all discussed how you were going to stay hidden and not answer the door, right?
I didn't discuss anything. They just said that there was like an FBI agent or an agent outside. So
and
I just
you
never
decided
answered.
not to answer the door and let them in, right?
No, why would I let them in?
Let me make sure that we're being clear here.
Yes, sir.
Did you know that the police were outside your door?
I didn't know who was outside my door. I didn't know until his coworker had stated that there was an undercover or an agent outside.
And after he stated that, did you know that there were police outside your door?
They were gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they knocked.
Okay.
And then they were gone.
You didn't stay hidden for over 45 minutes
No,
while
sir.
these phone calls are happening?
I was at home. I just didn't open the door.
Okay. during the entire first proffer and 2/3 of the second proffer, you never said that Charlie did it or ordered it. Isn't that true?
Not specifically, no.
Now, today you come in here and you talk about how on Halloween, Charlie asked you if there was someone who could hurt his ex-brother-in-law, right?
I stated that on the proffer.
That's fine.
Yes, sir.
It took you a while to state it in the proffer, but I admit you did. It took you about an hour and 40 minutes. But today, that's what your testimony was, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you know that you had only started dating Charlie Adelson about 2 weeks before Halloween?
Probably. We just started talking. I don't know specifically if it was 2 weeks.
Do you know that at the time of Halloween 2013, Charlie Adelson had absolutely no idea anything about your ex?
I wouldn't know, sir.
Well, let me see if I can refresh your memory. Do you recall text messages in November 27th of 2013 where you said to...
Sustained.
Okay.
Please show the witness the document.
But let me ask some questions first. Isn't it true that Charlie Adelson didn't know about your ex until November 27th, 2013?
I wouldn't know, sir.
And even then, he didn't know much about him?
I wouldn't know.
Let me approach with,
You may.
what number is it? Defense Exhibit 34. You have it. Text messages.
What am I looking at, sir?
These text messages between you and Charlie Adelson. Does that refresh your recollection that he didn't know about your ex until the earliest, November 27th, 2013?
Yes, sir.
Halloween's in October, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, you talk about this letter and Charlie printing it up. In all the times in Charlie's house, you ever see him? Does he have a computer? He doesn't own a computer, right?
He had a little office in his house, but I don't know if there was a computer or not. I don't recall.
Do you recall during these interviews that the investigators kept on pushing you whether Charlie gave you money during the trips?
Repeat the question, sir.
Do you recall during these interviews that the investigators kept on pushing you, asking you a lot of questions about whether Charlie Adelson gave you any money before the two men took the trips?
Yes. And I answered them.
I know you did.
Okay.
And it took you 22 minutes left in the second proffer where you finally said he gave you a few $100s before each trip.
Yes, sir.
Repeatedly before then, you couldn't even remember that, right? You were confused as you said it.
No, I could remember it. It was just very hard when I was speaking, especially when I was speaking with Sergeant Sanford in the room because he was frustrated with me. So once he left the room, it was an easier conversation to have, and I wasn't so pressured.
It was an easier conversation to have because, in fact, Investigator Bennett started to play the part of Katie Magbanua, right?
I don't know what you mean by that,
Well,
sir.
she started to testify for you.
No, sir, she did not.
It wasn't mostly her talking and you saying yes?
No, sir.
Isn't it true that it wasn't until an hour and 16 minutes and 31 seconds into the second proffer where you were still continuing to say that you didn't become aware that this was going to be a murder until sometime between the first and second trips to Tallahassee?
Yes, sir. I told you it was very hard for me to admit my part in all of this. I'm sorry.
So 4 hours into your proffers, you were still saying that you didn't know the first trip was for a murder. That's fair to say, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go on to a little different subject. You started dating Sigfredo Garcia just after high school.
Yes, sir.
By the time you broke up with him, you had been with Sigfredo on and off for more than a decade.
Yes, sir.
By the way, when you dated Charlie Adelson, he thought you were broken up with Sigfredo Garcia, right?
I was broken up with him.
Well, did you have sexual relations with Sigfredo Garcia while dating Charlie Adelson?
Yes, I did.
Charlie didn't know that, right?
I mean, that's not something I would tell him.
Now, you considered him to be your husband.
Yes, sir.
You met Charlie Adelson at work
Yes, sir.
at a place called Sophie Dental.
Sophie Dental.
Sorry, Sophie Dental.
Yes, sir.
And that was in South Beach.
Yes, sir.
And you started dating in the middle of October of 2013.
In the middle of October? No, we started dating before that.
When did you start dating?
I don't recall the exact date, but it was definitely before October.
If I told you
September.
do you recall that your first date was at a restaurant kind of in the building?
I believe so, yes.
If I told you that the date of that was October 9th, would that refresh your recollection? Could
Yes,
that be
sir.
right?
Possibly, yes, sir.
Now, when you dated Charlie Adelson, he treated you well.
Yes, sir.
I think you said you didn't know he had money. You knew he had money.
I mean, he wasn't very flashy with it. I know he was well off.
He took you to nice dinners.
Yes, sir.
That was different than your past relationship, right?
I've been in nice dinners with Sigfredo.
Did Charlie treat you nicer than Sigfredo?
I wouldn't say that he treated me nicer at that time, yes, because I was going through a lot with Sigfredo.
Did Charlie ever lay hands on you?
No, sir.
Did Sigfredo?
We've gotten into arguments, yes.
One where he ripped off your necklace?
No, he's never ripped off any necklace
No?
of mine. No.
Now, at first, Charlie was the pursuer. Is that fair to say? He pursued you.
Yes, sir.
Over time, you became more serious.
I believe so.
And he made it clear to you over time, namely in the spring of 2014, that he didn't want anything different than casual, right?
I mean, I think we were both in agreement with that, yes.
But you had questions about it. You asked him, right?
I believe so.
And he told you, I like the way things are.
Yes, sir.
Now, Sigfredo came to know that you were dating Charlie, correct?
Yes, sir.
And during your second trial, you testified that you told Sigfredo about Charlie to make Sigfredo mad.
Probably.
You wanted to throw it in his face that you were dating a successful dentist, right?
That I was dating somebody, period, because I never really dated anybody after Sigfredo.
Sigfredo hated Charlie.
I mean, yes.
You told Charlie on one occasion, if you see him, run. Isn't that what you told him?
Not that I can recall now.
Is it possible that you told him that?
No, but he would be scared of Sigfredo, yes.
Sigfredo considered you the love of his life, right?
I believe so.
He made it clear to you that he wanted you back and didn't want you to be with Charlie, right?
It's not that he made it clear, but we were trying to work it out for our family.
Now, Charlie talks a lot, right?
Yes, he does.
And he repeats himself over and over.
Yes, sir.
As a traveling periodontist, he's in the car a lot for work, right?
Yes, sir.
And what does he do when he's in the car a lot? Talks on the phone?
Talk on the phone, yes, sir.
And he'd call you a lot on the phone, right?
He would at that time, yes.
And at that time, he would sometimes call you early in the morning, right?
Yes, sir.
He'd call you sometimes in his breaks at work.
Yes, sir.
He'd call you late at night.
Yes, we were dating.
Exactly. He'd talk to you a ton.
Yes, sir.
He talks to his mom a lot on the phone too, right?
I believe so.
Well, you witnessed it, right?
Yes.
You would be with him a lot when he would talk to his mom, right? On the phone.
Yes, sir.
And by the way, you talk on the phone a lot with Sigfredo Garcia, right?
Yes, sir.
And that makes sense because he's the father of your two children, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, in 2014, you became aware of Charlie's family issues, right?
Yes, sir.
You heard him talking on the phone a lot to his mom, right?
Yeah, he's always talking to his
And
mom.
also, when you guys would go out, as you know, Charlie likes to talk, right?
Yes, sir.
And so a topic of frequent conversation would be what he had just talked to his mom about, right?
No, he never told me what he was talking to his mom about.
No, so he never told you about the problems that his sister was having? He wouldn't recount those conversations that he was having with his mom?
Not when he's on the phone with his mom. Maybe if we're just, laying down or talking, he'd mention it once in a blue moon.
And you would ask him questions about it, right?
Not really.
He told you about this TV was cheaper than a hitman joke many times, right?
Yes, he's made that comment before.
And he repeated it to many people, right?
Yes, sir, he has.
He makes a lot of bad jokes, right?
Yes, he does.
Did you ever tell him, Charlie, why are you making that joke when we're actually hiring a hitman? Like, don't you think that's a bad idea? Did you ever say that to him?
No, because feels like he's untouchable.
No, because you really weren't hiring a hitman. He didn't know he was hiring a hitman, right? That's why you didn't tell him that, right?
He knew he was hiring a hitman.
So when he made that joke in front of Professor Lacoste on March 11th at Yardbird.
That he made that joke?
Yeah, you know he made the joke at that dinner, right?
I don't recall that. No, sir.
Okay.
Unless I was talking to Wendi and I didn't pay attention to what they were talking about.
Well, let's talk about that dinner a little bit on March 11th, just 6 weeks before the first attempt that in your proffers you didn't know about. You all ate outside on the patio?
Yes, sir.
And during this dinner, you and Wendi talked a lot about your exes, didn't you?
Not that we talk a lot about the exes. I always speak of my children, so I'm pretty sure I mentioned my kids and she mentioned her kids.
You didn't probe information from Wendi about her ex, and while you were that's why you brought up your exes, your ex.
No, sir. We did not talk about any exes.
Were you aware that Sigfredo and Luis Rivera were sitting in a car scoping you out?
I didn't know that until my trial.
Now, the state showed you a picture of you on the beach with Wendi Adelson.
Yes, sir.
No discussion about a murder plot during that.
No.
The jet ski incident, was Charlie scared?
Yes, sir.
Were you upset?
Of course.
Did it cause a whole string of text messages and fights between you and Sigfredo?
After that incident, yes.
You were afraid that Charlie was going to break up with you, right?
Not really.
Really, your text messages don't show that you were upset that Charlie might break up with you? That Sigfredo was trying to run your life?
Well, I was upset, but I didn't really care if Charlie was going to break up with me or not.
Now, I want to take you to the week of the murder. And we'll start with July 14th. You had dinner with Charlie the night of July 14th, right?
Not that I can recall.
Oh, you don't recall having dinner with him the night of July 14th?
No, sir.
Are you sure you didn't have dinner with him the night of July 14th?
I can't recall. If you'd show me something.
Do you recall him working late and coming towards your house and meeting him at a place near the water on July 14th?
No, sir.
Well, let's do it this way. If you had dinner with him on July 14th, just 4 days before the murder,
Yes, sir.
did you pick up money from him at that point in time?
No, sir, because I don't even remember that dinner.
Assuming that the dinner happened,
Yes,
which I
sir.
think the state's going to prove,
Okay.
did you pick up any money from him at that dinner?
No, sir. I don't even recall that dinner.
Fair enough. Do you recall having lunch with him on July 17th, the day before the murder?
No, sir.
Let me try to refresh your memory on this. Do you recall on July 16th that Charlie worked late and went out to dinner with Erica Johnson?
I can't recall.
Do you recall that you got in a fight with him that night because you thought he might be cheating on you?
No, sir. I don't recall it.
Do you recall that there are text messages in which you were upset that he was out so late? You don't recall that?
No, sir. Do you have something to show me?
I don't need to. Do you recall that he told you on that call that he had worked late, that he had gone out with Erica, and that he would have a lunch with you the next day?
I don't recall any of those days, sir.
Do you recall that on the call on that night, the evening of the 16th, it's actually the very morning of the 17th, it's after midnight, that you were adamant that you wanted to have dinner with him on the 18th?
No, sir. I
You don't remember
recall
that?
any of those days. That's why.
You don't remember that. It's fine.
Show me.
The answer is you don't remember that, right?
No, I can't recall.
I get to ask the questions,
Yes, sir.
okay?
Yes.
That's how this works.
Yes, sir.
Now, you went to lunch with him near his house. Do you recall that?
No, sir.
One moment.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall going to Vila's? It's like a Cuban-Mexican place right by Charlie's house.
I know of the restaurant, but I don't remember the date when we went, or, we've eaten there before. Yes.
You don't recall going there the day before the murder?
No, sir.
Nonetheless, if you had been there, you didn't collect any money that day, right?
No, sir.
Do you recall that during that lunch, you got in a big fight?
During what lunch?
The lunch on the 17th that you don't remember.
How can I tell you what happened if I don't remember the date and you're not showing me anything?
let's talk about after the murder. One moment, Your Honor.
Take your time.
Isn't it true that Charlie Adelson gave you $138,000 the night of the murder, not $100,000?
I never counted the money.
Isn't it true that you were paid $3,000 every month after the murder?
No, sir.
Isn't it true that you told Charlie Adelson that a terrible thing had happened? Your friend got an idea to do this. You didn't know anything about it, but you would help him.
Repeat that question, sir.
Isn't it true that you told Charlie Adelson that a friend of yours had done this, that you had talked
No,
too
sir.
much, but that you would do everything you could to help Charlie Adelson?
No, sir.
Isn't it true that you told him that if he ever went to the police, these people would do to him and his family what they had done to Professor Markel?
No, sir.
If the state proves that for the next 20 months you received payments, does the state have it wrong?
That I received payments?
For the
For
next
me to-
20 months after July 18th, if the state proves, they're going to bring up a financial person who's
Yes.
going to show cash payments. When the state proves that,
Yes,
do
sir.
they have it wrong?
No, because I deposited throughout every month.
The payments that Charlie were making to you.
No, what Sigfredo had given to me.
Is it true that you were the mastermind behind Professor Markel's murder?
No, sir. That was Charlie.
I'm sure it was.
I didn't have any information on Mr. Markel.
Magbanua, do not volunteer information.
Yes.
Wait for a question, respond accordingly to the question.
But
Sorry, Your Honor.
by the way, on these wires that we're going to hear, you're repeatedly lying to Charlie, right?
Repeatedly lying about what?
Well, you're telling him that you're calling the undercover number, right?
Yes, I lied to
You
him.
never called the undercover number.
No, because I was telling Sigfredo to call that number.
Ma'am, let me ask the questions.
I'm answering.
I know you have an agenda, but let me ask the questions.
Objection, move to strike, argument ended.
Sustained. The jury are to disregard the last comment about any agendas. Please continue.
On those wires, you tell Charlie Adelson that you've called the undercover number, don't you?
Yes, I said that.
And you never called the undercover number.
Of course. Why would I call it?
You tell Charlie Adelson that you tried to call the number, but it's a non-working number. Do you recall saying that?
I believe so. Yes.
And that was a lie.
Yes, we were all lying to each other.
You call, Judge,
He was responding to your question. You don't have to like the answer.
I actually love it. You never lied to Sigfredo on those wires, did you?
Yes, I did.
When did you lie to Sigfredo on those wires?
Well, he was lying to me, actually.
I asked a different question. When did you lie to Sigfredo on those wires? Give me one example of lying to Sigfredo.
You're right. I'm stating that Sigfredo was lying to me.
Ms. Magbanua, I'm going to ask the question one more time.
No, I didn't lie to Sigfredo.
You never once lied to Sigfredo Garcia on those wires.
Not that I can recall, no.
But you repeatedly lied to Charlie Adelson on those wires, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
By the way, you and Sigfredo Garcia talked about how you needed to get a burner phone, right?
No, Sigfredo was the one who got the burner phones.
Okay. You and Sigfredo got burner phones, right?
And Sigfredo bought the burner phones. Yes.
And you used a burner phone, right?
Yes, he advised me to do so.
Did you ever talk to Charlie Adelson about getting a burner phone?
I wasn't aware, but I thought he had one.
You told Charlie Adelson that Sigfredo Garcia left a voicemail for the undercover. You recall telling him that?
I believe so, yeah.
That was a lie, right?
I believe Sigfredo did leave a voicemail to the undercover.
You think he did, or you think they just heard about the voicemail, that he actually never called the undercover?
If he said he did, he probably did.
Now, shortly after the murder, You and Charlie break up, right?
Yes, sir.
Like immediately after.
I don't know if it's immediately after, but we stopped, hanging out as much.
Now, you keep on saying that the state hasn't promised you anything, right?
Yes, sir.
But you're hoping that they're going to help you, right?
Of course, I want to see my children again.
Redirect examination.
Ms. Magbanua, I'm going to approach you with the text message exhibit that the defense showed you. Maybe I misunderstood, but is this text showing that the defendant found out about Sigfredo in November, or that Sigfredo found out about the defendant in November?
From the text messages, it's that Sigfredo found out about Charlie.
All right. The job in this case, there's some question about, is it to harm, is it to rough up, is it to kill? What was the job?
It was to kill.
And you knew it was to kill?
Those exact words weren't mentioned, but
Did you
yes.
know that this was going to result in a death,
Yes, ma'am.
not a roughing up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I know you don't, do you know precisely when you found out it was going to be a death?
No, ma'am.
But can you tell this jury it was definitely before the murder?
Before July.
And did Charlie Adelson know it was a murder?
Yes, ma'am. He did.
Did Sigfredo Garcia know it was a murder?
Yes, ma'am. He did.
No further questions.
You may step down. Will the witness be recalled at any point?
She could be, Judge. I would ask that she remain under the rule.
You and Charlie break up, right?
Yes, sir.
Like immediately after.
I don't know if it's immediately after, but we stopped,
Let's watch the end again.
hanging out as much.
A little faster though. Hmm.
Now, you keep on saying that the state hasn't promised you anything, right?
Yes, sir.
But you're hoping that they're going to help you, right?
Of course, I want to see my children again.
Redirect examination.
So there was no bang in the end. Let me see.
Hasn't promised you anything, right?
Yes, sir.
But you're hoping that they're going to help you, right?
Of course, I want to see my children again.
That's it. Hmm. Okay, she wants to see her children again. I don't know. You would want to have something better for the end.
Redirect examination.
Cross. He had already made that point anyway. So obviously, Georgia Kaplan is not very impressed. Her rebuttal is very short, quick.
I'm going to approach you with the text message exhibit that the defense showed you. Maybe I misunderstood, but is this text showing that the defendant found out about Sigfredo in November, or that Sigfredo found out about the defendant in November?
From the text messages, it's that Sigfredo found out about Charlie.
All right. The job in this case, there's some question about, is it to harm, is it to rough up, is it to kill? What was the job?
It was to kill.
And you knew it was to kill?
Those exact words weren't mentioned, but
Did you
yes.
know that this was going to result in a death,
Yes, ma'am.
not a roughing up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I know you don't, do you know precisely when you found out it was going to be a death?
No, ma'am.
But can you tell the jury it was definitely before the murder?
Before July.
And did Charlie Adelson know it was a murder?
Yes, ma'am. He did.
Did Sigfredo Garcia know it was a murder?
Yes, ma'am. He did.
No further questions.
You may step down. Will the witness be recalled at any point? Well, please approach.
Okay, everybody, thanks so much for coming along for the ride. I'm restudying the evidence. I had a little bit of time this afternoon and wanted to spend my afternoon of what holiday is it? Valentine's Day with you guys. Ladybug and I have just created, over the last couple of days, a new video. And I'm going to put a link right here for you guys if you want to go and hit the notifications button. That's going to be on Deep Dive True Crime tonight at 7:45. So it's all set up for this evening on Deep Dive True Crime, 7:45 p.m. I hope to see you guys there on the chat. And thanks everybody for joining. Again, I was just taking notes, and at some moment I stopped taking notes, but I'm going to probably watch it again, but this time without you guys. And I want to do a summary of the testimony of Katherine Magbanua on direct and point out what are the points that Dan Markel was trying to make in the cross-examination. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for watching, everybody. You know what to do if you want more of this type of content. Till next time, Mentor, Lawyer, and Ladybug.